Right, hello everybody and welcome to another episode. Today I am absolutely delighted to welcome Ditte Maynard, who is the Insight Marketing and Intelligence Director at Caro Healthcare. She leads huge global brands, like an enviable combination of calm confidence and commercial flair. And when I was prepping to intro her, I was thinking about how I would sum up Ditte's kind of current role. And I stumbled upon kind of runs lean, thinks big. And I really mean that. The sheer number of countries and categories that her team helps steer is seriously impressive. You can instantly tell she's an incredible thinker, but like so warm as well. When we first sat down to talk about the podcast, Ditte wanted to know how we were, how I was, how our study's going more so than anything else. You can hear that she is so curious and a real supporter of people. I think she's the kind of leader who lifts everyone around her. So I am delighted to be interviewing you today. Ditte, welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Laura. It's absolutely wonderful to be here. I'm a sucker for your podcast and I've listened to all of them. So it's just wonderful to be on the other side.
Oh, well, hey, that is brilliant. That is really brilliant. I've absolutely loved the chance to kind of interview people, to kind of take some really simple questions and just sort of see where it goes. But I think always just so interesting to get kind of up close to clients' worlds. And I think all client sides are interested in other client sides as well. So I think it's got that appeal, which is great. So it's brilliant to have you with us today. I'm going to sort of dive straight in with our first question, which is why bother? You've had a brilliant career. You worked at some huge global brands. I'm really interested to know what it is that keeps you hooked.
It's a very good question, Laura, because I'm a person who gets bored quite easily and I really crave change and variety. So why is it then that I've been in Insight for all my professional life? And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. But if I had to summarize into two, I would say that firstly, I passionately believe that insight is a critical, if not one of the most important tool to help a company accelerate growth and do that in a cost-effective way. So it's extraordinarily motivating and rewarding to be really part of generating that growth. And it's very tangible. You can see how insight is really helping to do that. So that's the first reason. And the second reason, which taps into the fact that I get bored very easily, and that is that I think insight is so varied. So firstly, insight really taps into every single aspect of marketing. So whether that is branding, pricing, promotions, media, advertising, or empathy. But also, I think that if you work at Insight, it's so varied. So one day you can do a lot of data crunching of thousands of numbers, only to next day stand in front of senior stakeholders, trying to convince them and influence them to use data. And the next day, maybe you develop new data methodologies, only to kind of create a strong narrative to take a team through the insight findings. So it's extraordinarily varied, and that really keeps me on my toes. And I get to kind of wear different hats on a daily basis, and that's super motivating to me.
I think it's so it's so energizing listening to you anyway, but I think it's particularly energizing to hear what you started that with it is the thing that can really accelerate a business. And I think whenever we had a sort of client workshop piece last night, and people were talking about kind of commercial value and kind of listening to the customer and kind of proving that, and sometimes the sort of question marks maybe that people have found in different businesses or sort of different roles around it. And so I think it's so powerful to hear you say that kind of so clearly, like it is the thing that will accelerate a business.
It is, if done in the right way, obviously, and we are going to talk about that later on, I'm sure, but it's not only about doing the right insight, but it's also how you translate that into a narrative and how you take that narrative and influence the right people at the right time in the right way to really drive that action. But I think that it comes back to that all the time. This is the reason, this is the why I'm doing this, because I know just how powerful insight can be to drive an organization to success, and hugely motivating.
My next question is one of my favorite questions because I think it's a really nice way to get to know someone, even though you're talking about other people. And it's who do you owe? And I'm really interested to know over the sort of course of your kind of career today, who has kind of really left a mark, their kind of fingerprints are kind of in what you do or how you think.
Yes. So I think, Laura, I'm super lucky because I've had a lot of peers and bosses supporting me in my career. So I'm very, very grateful and very, very privileged and happy about that. But I think if I were to choose one person, it's actually one time I had a boss who didn't support me. And I think that experience really shaped me because during that time, I learned how to be resilient. I haven't cracked that skill. I haven't mastered it 100%, but I really developed resilience during that time. And I also learned that it's super important to take 100% responsibility for your own career. And the final thing I learned is also to lead without a title. And I think that's incredibly important because if you're a director, it's actually easier to influence other senior stakeholders. But if you're kind of junior manager who, doesn't really kind of get promoted, it's much harder. Then you have to pull on all the strings and become super sharp in your influencing and negotiation skills. And I think that forced me to sharpen my skills there a little bit. Again, it's work in progress as it is, but I definitely improved a lot in that time.
There's so much in there that I completely love. I think so interesting to choose someone who kind of could have been in your way, I guess, rather than somebody who kind of completely kind of gave you wings. I think, really, really interesting. I think anyone who is listening, who is maybe working with someone who they don't kind of totally collaborate with, right now, or finds quite difficult, or maybe got a boss that they feel like is in their way, it's kind of inspiring to feel like this doesn't mean there's like a pause button. You can learn things from kind of people who you kind of maybe don't expect to learn things from.
Yeah, absolutely. And another person I kind of take a lot of inspiration from, and I'm a little bit of a sucker for personal development and read a lot of these books, and it's this wonderful author called Robin Sharma, that I'm sure you've heard of. He wrote The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, and he's got a quote that is one of my favorite quotes, and it's very cheesy, but it's actually very good, and it's about transform your stumbling blocks to your stepping stones. And I think that's super powerful because we all have stumbling blocks in our life most of the time, right? But if we try really hard and if we look really hard, we can actually turn them into a stepping stone instead, which I think is extraordinarily powerful. And I know it's easier said than done in many ways, but it's a good reminder, I think, in life and in business generally.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm really curious to know, Ditte, some of your what's your secrets? But I'm interested to know any sort of like big moves, big kind of either strategies or ways of thinking about the challenge of getting businesses to really care about consumers that you think kind of really work for you or you really love.
Yeah, so my secret is very simple, and it is to keep it simple. And I think simplicity is extraordinarily powerful in life, but also in insight, across all areas of insight. But if I take kind of the simplicity in terms of the findings, in this example, we have this mantra in my team at Karo that whatever we do and whatever insights we share, they have to be easy to understand and easy to act on. And I say that several times a week, so I'm super repetitive, but I think it's really, really, really important. So any insight have to be easy to understand and easy to act on, because if they're not easy to understand or easy to act on, people will not use the insight, and then the investment and our time have been in vain, right? So I think that's super important. For example, I would always take 3 bullet points of super crisp, super actionable, insight-driven recommendations versus a deck of 150 pages of interesting data. So it's about driving action with insight, and you can only do that if you simplify it and make it super easy for people to use. It's almost kind of serving the insight on a silver plate, and then the stakeholders just take the insights and make it easy. Otherwise, it stops there. I've seen so many examples of that, so I want to avoid it.
Yeah, I think you're so right about simplicity. It's a sort of complicated thing, simplicity. Because, of course, you've got to go through all of the thinking, haven't you? You've got to go through all that, all the mess in order to get to those beautiful three things.
Yeah, completely. It's a skill, and it takes a lifetime to completely master it. But it is exactly as you're saying, Laura. There's no shortcuts. You can't start with simplicity. You have to go through the complexity and all the data points, and then and it's probably quite a lot of iterations before you actually get to something that is super sharp and super simple too. But I do think that complexity can paralyze, and in our world, insight world, that insight, I believe, is worthless if it's not acted on. Simplicity is absolutely critical to drive that action, and also help us, grow as an industry as well in terms of credibility and influence.
I think it's really interesting when you sort of talk about just sort of serving it on a plate to stakeholders, giving them just a really simple, as you say, sort of easy to understand, easy to act on. Underneath all of that, you must be really adept at building kind of real trust, real sort of advisor status in your business, because people are data hungry and they do want to look underneath things. And I think if you are just kind of serving them something, they have every right to kind of interrogate that. So alongside that, you must be building kind of real, credibility, trust, whatever it is with your stakeholders to get them to just act on the simplicity you're serving them.
Yeah, it's a good observation, Laura. And I think, maybe it's not as simple as this, but I think it's also about being very mindful of who your stakeholders are, right? There are stakeholders out there who still want to have the data and the numbers that are backing up the recommendations 100%, right? But even for these people, I can simplify it. It's not that I'm sending them Excel spreadsheets to look through, so it's about adapting the content to the audience and thereby adapting the level of simplicity to it. But
have you got any, because I do think it's a challenge everybody comes across. I think it's one of the hallmarks of great storytelling. People struggle with storytelling. And I think that simplicity looks great in hindsight. I think once it's done brilliantly, people look at it and think, yeah, fantastic. Like, right, we can get busy now. We can get on with actioning some of this. Yeah. But I think when you're trying to create it, it's way harder than it looks. And I guess there's a lot in there. There's a lot about, I've worked really hard on this project. I want to put that in and that in and that in, and this is interesting. What about this? What about that? Do you have
number one trap, hey? Yeah, I know.
Do you have any, either sort of tips or thoughts or kind of inspiration for how people can kind of force themselves to take that step back to bring things to that kind of more sort of simple conclusion?
Yeah, so I think firstly it's about, and this is, very, very basic, but I think it's about revisiting the brief, obviously. And in the research brief, you have what's the business objective, which is often, 2 sentences, and then what's the research objective, which is kind of longer part of it. But in the business objective could be how can we grow E45 by 20% in the next year? And if you provide insight that would just kind of answer that, I mean, that's one way to just ruthlessly prioritize. Everything else that we learned is interesting and could be relevant, but it's actually not really helping with that key question. And that is the key question that stakeholders will have in their mind when they come into a debrief. And I think if we put ourselves in their shoes, that they are sitting there waiting for an answer to that question, then it's quite easy then to kind of, no, we take that one out, we take that one out, we take that one out. And that might be interesting because it builds the story, etc. But it comes back to what the key question is, I think. And then also I think You're absolutely right. It's very tempting to show the homework, right? You know, sometimes I've worked on super complex studies like price elasticity, you know, or MMMs, and I feel, yeah, that's interesting. I'm learning a lot here. It's quite sophisticated, it's quite advanced, and it's very tempting to want to showcase that. But people don't care about, you know, sample sizes or the different algorithms or the different analytics behind it. They honestly don't. They want to understand how they can grow the business or accelerate growth in a very cost-effective way. So use that as a filter, and then it helps to dictate a little bit. And I think another temptation is also to use quite researchy words, right? Or kind of complicate the language and the vocabulary. But it doesn't have to be like that, you know. Put it in layman's term. You know, people are humans, and they're super busy, and us come into them and present something that's hugely complex and use inside buzzwords, you know, that's not going to land. It's just not. But I think, to your point before, Laura, I think it's extraordinarily important, obviously, to kind of adapt the content to each stakeholders. And I have some stakeholders who wants the data, wants to see it. Other stakeholders just kind of want one page with 3 bullet points. So it's important to understand that too.
Yeah, absolutely. In that example you mentioned, E45, one thing when we first sat down to speak, I thought, wow, your kind of remit is diverse with a very kind of lean team, both kind of globally, but also the kind of different categories that you cover. And then when you consider something like, say, for example, E45, which would sit in, which would do lots of different jobs depending on your kind of skin needs, but it would also sit in the realm of kind of you know, just skincare kind of beauty. And I was thinking, goodness, like that could you choose something that's moving kind of faster? You know, there's so many kind of different influences, and that's just in one of your kind of many categories. That it just seems like a huge amount to kind of spin and keep on top of. What are some of your secrets there?
Oh my God, I don't know. I think it's linked to what I said before. I get bored easily, Laura, so I just love having a lot on my plate. So, and I got a fantastic team too, and we quite, so that's part of it. But then also, I think another part of it is actually in the background. What we have done really well as a team is we have actually set up a very slick machine. So we have best practices for all our concept tests, for all our product tests, for advertising pre-tests. We work with slick agencies that need minimal briefing because they know us, they know the business, they know our brands. We have standardized methodologies where we can, obviously not where we should. So it's super slick. So it's very little waste, and I think that's super key because we are a very lean team. So that's part of it, but also to recruit the right people. I'm super lucky to have an amazing team, and we work super well together too. So, but yeah, but some days, I'm not going to lie, it's kind of seriously, I'm not sure 24 hours in the day how I'm going to actually do this, but most of the time it's manageable and fun and stretchy, which I like.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It just struck me that, I think that, you know, not only have you got your 60 countries and your many categories, but you're also operating in a sphere with kind of more of that, I think, kind of going on than maybe kind of other sectors outside of healthcare. I am really interested to know, Ditte, what your sort of, playbook is for kind of how you keep winning, or kind of words of advice really for people listening. How will they win in the future? What are the sort of what's your kind of inside track on the world of insight and customer centricity?
Love this question, and I could go on forever with this. I think it's not one fix or one piece of advice, but I narrow it down to 2, Laura. So
Brilliant.
The first one is more kind of a practical one, and the second one is a little bit more how you rock up as an insight professional, which I passionately believe in. So, but let's start with the first one. So the first one is that it's hugely important to drive an insight-led culture or a consumer-centric culture. And I tell you why. So we talked about we're a team of 3, Caro's inside team, but Caro has about 500 people. We operate in 80 countries, 90 countries, 80 brands, and it's absolutely impossible for the 3 of us to be the voice of the consumer in every single meeting where big decisions are being made at Caro. We just can't, because we're just 3 people. But what we can do is to drive a consumer-centric culture so that everyone thinks the consumer first, that everyone understands the value of insight, and that everyone want to use insight to help the decision making. And that's absolutely critical, because that means that we are then scaling ourselves. And we can help with, training, and we spent so much time in the last couple of years to really drive that culture. And that's another podcast to talk about how we do that. And now it's really, really paying off. So I think that's hugely, hugely important, because otherwise it's very hard, very, very hard to make every important decision be insight-led, and therefore help to accelerate this growth for Caro. So that's the first one. The second one is a little bit more personal, I guess, Laura, and it is about being generous with your energy. And the reason I say that is because if I were to summarize my role in one sentence, it's all about driving change and driving action, whether that is to create an insight-led culture at a company or drive action based on insight results. I'm responsible for driving that action. Otherwise, it's a waste of money and time, as we talked about. And if I sit like this and don't show any passion and about what I'm doing or why insight, you should listen to insight, there's no credibility. I need to put in some energy, some showcase the passion I do feel for insight, because that builds credibility. That means I can influence better. That means I can inspire more, both the business but also my team. So be generous for your energy is an advice I have.
Do you know what? I love that. I so love that. I think that there's those moments in sort of very early in your career where you're first kind of maybe speaking in big meetings or maybe kind of presenting things, and you often either have an idea, or maybe that's in your own head, or it's been sort of enforced on you that you've got to be sort of very professional. And when we take it to a professional place, it becomes like
monotonous and show your personality, But sorry, I interrupted you, Laura.
No, I think you're so right, that the sort of flatness that you can get when you try and control too much. And I think actually we talk so much about authenticity, and again, it's a kind of overused word, but I think that leaning into it is so important. Your first point in kind of answer to this of building a really kind of consumer-centric culture, embedding that kind of within the business. I mean, yes, absolutely, that could be a kind of spin-off episode. I am so interested to just dig underneath that a little bit more, because it is something that so many brands talk about, being customer-obsessed and being customer-centric. So many people kind of really achieve. We've actually asked the question on several kind of webinars. We've got massive base size of this now on across lots of different industries and things, and very few people really think their business has nailed it. And when you look for like external validation on that, studies by places like Forrester would completely agree, and they put it at somewhere between 1 in 10 and 1 in 20 kind of really nail it. So it's something we talk a lot about and don't kind of really manage to make headway on. It sounds like you are kind of really kind of playing in that area. What have been, is there a sort of little snippet you can give us, something you can kind of share with us about what were some of the big kind of pivot moments that really helped embed that kind of sense of customer-centric culture?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's not something that you can do overnight. It takes time, but it bogs down to 3 or maybe 4 things. So the first one is to continuously demonstrate the value of insight. So it's almost like having a little bit of a PR campaign for the insight team and for the insights. So what does that mean? Take every opportunity to present insight or present what you can do to help teams at team meetings, company-wide presentation. You have to be there. So every opportunity, company newsletter, company website, or whatever it is. So really maximize that. So it's about having a very thought through comms plan, actually, in terms of who's the target, what's the message we want to communicate, how do we want to rock up as a team, energetic, strategic, enablers, get the business, and we're here to help. So that's one big part, and that takes time, but that's very, very important. The second one, which is also super important, Laura, is to actively break down the barriers to doing insights. And if you look at the barriers, there's often two things. One is cost and one is time. So I don't have money to do insight on this occasion. I'm just going to launch this advertising, or I don't have time. We need to launch a new product in 2 weeks. Can't do it. So what we also worked really hard on is to remove or at least minimize these barriers. So we have developed best practice methodologies for concept testing, advertising testing that sometimes only takes 1 day or 2 days and only costs 10% of what I paid previously in my career. So we work super hard on that with intent, because we wanted to drive this insider culture. We understand that part of that is to remove the barriers, and therefore what do we need to do? And the third thing, which is also important, is to integrate insight into a company's existing rhythm and processes. So make sure that there is an insight section in a creative brief, make sure that insight feature at the heart of brand plans, and make sure that for every senior marketing team meeting, we kick off with sharing market shares, etc., etc. So it's kind of natural, it's expected, and it's requested. So these three things are absolutely critical, and it's not by chance. This is something that we have, spent hours on setting the vision, setting the strategy, but also down to the nitty-gritty of an action plan. And then we are, on a daily basis, we are trying to deliver against it. So, yeah, that's in a nutshell, Laura.
That was brilliant. That was absolutely brilliant. Thank you for that insight. I think what I'm sort of so struck by is it is so... There's such kind of precision and kind of focus in that. It is a complete mission, isn't it?
Right?
Yeah.
Fast, so yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I loved, I mean, thank you for sharing it. And I think there's so much insight in all of that. But the one that I think I feel really kind of drawn to is your first one around sort of the PR machine that you need to be. And I think that sometimes when things feel, busy and there's lots and you think, oh my goodness, we've now got to do our own PR, it can feel like another thing. But I think it is just so critical, and it can be a lot of fun.
yeah, absolutely. And no, it's absolutely critical. But as I said, it's with intent. It is very purposeful. You need to have a plan. Otherwise, it won't happen, because we're all busy, right? And it's easy to prioritise things that are super important but not urgent. But so that's why it's important to have a plan. But yeah, we are probably quite annoying at Karo, because we rock up in every company meeting and every presentation. So, but it's paying off. It is paying off, so it's worthwhile.
Right, brilliant. Thank you so much for talking to me today, Ditte. I've so enjoyed it. It's been brilliant to hear from your experiences.
Oh, me too. Thank you so much for inviting me, Laura. I was super looking forward to this, and it was always great to spend time with you. And so thank you so much.
Well, hey, I think, I mean, it was just brimming with ideas and insight, but there's a few things that I'm going to kind of personally take away. And one is that kind of like lead without a title, and just that moment of just let that kind of really, really, really sink in. And the other is your story about the manager who maybe wasn't the manager that you wanted. But you can still accelerate. And I think you could sort of apply that to lots of things. It doesn't have to be a person. It could be a situation. It could be a project. It could be whatever. But I think you've just got such sort of like real, I think I called it like optimistic problem solving, but it's really contagious. It's really exciting. And I am going to try and channel a little bit more of that in my world.
Wonderful. Wow, it's been such a pleasure, Laura. Definitely.
Well, hey, thank you so much.
Thank you.